It has been a fantastic year for reading. Hey guys, welcome back. Here we are, wrapping up 2022. I have read over 100 books this year, and about half of those were 2022 releases. So today I'm going to go through my top 5 reads that were published in 2022. If you want to see a full list of all of the books that I read this year, you can check out my Goodreads. And if you want to see my list of top 5 worst 2022 books, that video was released last week, and I'll put the link to that video and my Goodreads below. But for now, here we go, the best. Number 5, A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This book is part of a duology, and the second part actually came out at the beginning of December, but I haven't started reading it yet because I have this thing where when I feel like something is going to be really good, I don't want to start it because I don't want it to be over. Like, you know, does that make sense? So I'm kind of waiting to start it until like I'm ready to be done with the duology. A River Enchanted has a Scottish folklore feel to it, and it takes place on the Isle of Cadence. This is an island that is steeped in magic and spirits, and there are 2 clans on the isle, one in the east and one in the west, and both sides have been enemies for decades. The main character, Jack, is a part of one of the clans, and he's called back to the island as the clan's daughters have been disappearing, and he's been enlisted to help try to find them. The way the story is told, it felt like we really had 4 main characters. Jack, and then also the clan's heiress, the clan's guard captain, and then the captain's wife, who is also the clan's healer. I was really impressed with how all of the characters in the book were so well developed. They all shared the spotlight in the story, and I found myself attached to all of them. The story had things that I loved, like tales and myths of the Isle. Rebecca Ross created her own folklore for the story that just felt so real and imaginative. I was really impressed by the tales that she just weaved into the story, and I just loved the overall vibe and the feeling of the world building in the story. I do have to say though, this book for me did start slow when I was reading it. I actually considered not finishing it at some points. The writing did have this young adult feel to it, and going into the book, I was expecting it to be more adult. So that took some getting used to for me. But once I got used to how the story was being told, it hooked me, and there was no way I was going to put it down. But honestly, it did take until about the 50% mark for me to be completely invested. It was definitely a slow burn. But by the ending, I was emotionally all invested in the story. The ending made me cry, and I love when books can do that. So it's really interesting for me that a book can go from, like I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this, to being on my list of top 5 for the year. But that's where we are, and I'm very excited for the second part of Fire Endless, really hoping that it is as good as the first part. Number 4, This Woven Kingdom by Tahereh Mafi. The premise of this story was inspired by Persian mythology, and it was fantastic. I got this in the January Illumicrate box, but I didn't actually read it until November, and I finished it and I was like, why did I wait to read this book? It's a story of this young woman who's working as a servant, but really she's the heir to a long-lost kingdom. Therefore, she's a threat to the current kingdom that she's residing in. So the current prince of that kingdom then has to determine where his loyalties lay once he meets her and gets to know her. In the book, we had a headstrong, independent female main character, a bratty prince who over time became this very likable character. And then on top of that, all of the random side characters were very fleshed out as well. I was very happy with how well all of the characters were written, and I really grew attached to them. The book was a dual point of view between our heroine and the prince, and I thought the method of storytelling was fantastic in the book. The author would end one point of view chapter on a cliffhanger, and then we would go to the other character's point of view and go back in time fill in the blanks, and then end on another cliffhanger. So all of the chapters simultaneously went back in time, but then also moved the story forward. The main reason this book is a part of my top 5 list is there was this part about 50% in that made me scream in shock. I don't want to spoil anything, but something got revealed. And just imagine sweet little me sitting in bed with like a lamp on and like it's all quiet and cozy and I'm just reading and I get to this part and I just go, what? Ah! I put the book down and I'm like, what? I did not see that coming. And whenever a book can make me exclaim out loud, it automatically makes me love that book so much more. Throughout reading this book, I legitimately had no idea what was going to happen. The book was over 500 pages, but it flew by so quickly. It was very fast paced and it's going to be a part of a trilogy. So I'm super excited by that. Number 3, Babble by R.F. Kuang. This book, I knew within the first 50 pages, it was going to be a showstopper. I got this book from the library first because I didn't know what to expect going into it. Then, by the time I was around page 100, I returned it to the library and I just bought a copy because I was like, I need to take my time to digest this book and to annotate it properly, and I just know I'm gonna want to own a copy of this book. Now, if you saw my December Book of the Month video, then you know how thrilled I was to see Babble as a December pick. Now, if you didn't see that video, you should take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss when I post. I'm always happy to see new subscribers, and also thank you so much if you've already subscribed. Now, Babble was published in August, but Book of the Month labeled it as their yearly look back, and it was a December main pick. And in that video, I ranted and raved about how if anyone was going to pick a book in December, it should be Babble. And at the point when I was saying that, I was only 100 pages into the book, and that's how confident I was that it was going to be great. And now that I've actually finished it, I stand by the fact that it's fantastic. So if you're looking for a good Book of the Month add-on, again, might I suggest Babble. Now, personally for me, the blurb description of the book almost scared me off. It sounded intimidating, but the book was a lot more digestible than I had anticipated. It is a fantasy dark academia genre book based in the 1800s at the Babel Institute of Translation at Oxford. The main character is Robin, and he's a young man from China who was taken at a young age after the death of his mother by an Oxford professor at Babel. This professor became his sponsor and destined Robin for a future at the Institute of Translation. This book was brilliantly crafted. It is a slow burn and it's divided into 5 parts. In each of the different parts, the intensity and the stakes grow in the story. More things just kept happening that were shocking, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the pages. At Babel, language and translation are used as a form of magic by way of silver bars. Once Robin is a student at Babel, we meet 3 other students who are also in his cohort. Throughout the years, the students are faced with racism and sexism, and we also see the ins and the outs of the Institute at Oxford. And the book is about learning that there are more unsavory things going on once you look deeper or pay attention. Throughout the book, Robin and his friends are forced to decide where their loyalties lay, and they're faced with many personal and ethical challenges. This book was just so fucking smart. I loved how it was done. I loved the writing. It was informative, but it was also done in a very atmospheric way that I felt like I could really envision myself in the setting and in the mood of each scene. This book invaded my dreams. That's how well it was done. I would read it before bed and then I would dream about being at Babel. That's how well done the book was. It was not a light, easy read, but it was a great read. And I do have to say, if you're interested in it, but a little unsure, I do feel like this would be a great audiobook to listen to, especially with like all the pronunciations of the different languages and everything. I think that listening to on audio, if I were to do a reread, I would definitely want to listen to on audio because I think that would add a lot to the story as well. Number 2, The Wrong Mr. Right by Stephanie Archer. Ooh, this is a fun one. I love a good, smutty romance book. And don't let the cartoon characters on the cover of this book fool you. This book was spicy, spicy, spicy. If spice in your books isn't your thing, then maybe don't read this one. But if it is your thing, well, I just gave you your new next read, so you're welcome. This book is a dating coach trope book. It can be read as a standalone, but it's book number 2 of the author's Queen Cove series. This series is based in a small coastal town and it centers on Hannah and Wyatt. Hannah is a quiet, reserved, bookish female main character, and she enlists the help of Wyatt, the outgoing surfer, to teach her how to gain confidence in dating before she hits her 30th birthday. This book is 100% a rom-com, and it's light and it's fluffy, and it truly did make me laugh out loud at bits. Stephanie Archer's writing style reminds me of Sally Thorne's The Hating Game and Sarah Hogel's You Deserve Each Other. It's the same kind of comedy style, but with more spicy scenes. The story was a dual point of view, which is my favorite. I love knowing what both characters are thinking, and in this case, each person had it bad for the other one. So we got to read about their immense mutual pining the whole time, and I just loved it. This book was everything. It was funny, it was sexy, it had great banter, the characters were well developed, and they had great personalities, and then by the end of the story, they had both grown into better people. Like, I really just wouldn't change a thing about this book. I really enjoy being able to read like light, fluffy things, especially if I'm feeling stressed out, and this is like the best type of book for that. So before we get to number 1 on my list, I have to list my honorable mentions. These books didn't make the top 5, but they were so close. Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This is a book about secrets of this magical island and the locals that live on the island. But mainly I loved it for the extreme slow burn second chance romance aspect. It was just so tender and so sweet. The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This was a great romance that included the fake dating and grumpy sunshine tropes. Only in this case, the woman was the grumpy and the man was the sunshine. It was delightful to read. My only gripe were there were absolutely no sex scenes. So if you're looking for a completely clean romance, this is a great option. The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. I've been adoring the retellings / inspired by type books lately, and this one's based on Korean mythology, and it was incredibly well written. I found the story to be very quick, but also full of depth. The main character was strong and courageous, and the descriptions of the spirit realm where most of the book took place was very interesting. And lastly, The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. It was an extreme struggle not to put this book into my top 5. It was just fantastic. It was a romance book with a ghost, but it was just so much more than that. It covered the difficult topic of grief and also did it in such a touching way. During moments of this book, I just had tears streaming down my face. This book was just so unique, and I definitely think it's worth a read. Here we are, number 1, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Who would have thought a memoir would be the best book I read in 2022? Nonfiction typically isn't a genre I enjoy reading, but man, Jennette's story cut me deep. If you do go to read this book, proceed with caution, as there are content warnings for this book for abuse and eating disorders. If you don't know who Jennette McCurdy is, she is a child star best known as Sam from iCarly on Nickelodeon. Back in the day, I watched the first few seasons of this show back when it came out. I remember coming home from school and just having it on. Honestly, I never gave much thought to how damaging being a child actor was to Jennette. And now after reading this book, I kind of feel like shit for just enjoying the show without giving anything a second thought. I think we often forget that actors are real people And in this book, we really get to know Jennette and what she went through, and you see how much she truly didn't want any of the success that she had as an actress. I think that Jennette really has a knack for writing. The book was written in very quick, under 5-page chapters, which made it super easy to digest. She didn't need very many pages in a chapter to get her point across with what she was trying to convey. The book was very raw and angry and to the point, and it didn't feel like Jennette held anything back. I can imagine this book would have been very cathartic to write, and I think being so open and vulnerable throughout the book was just very brave of her. I am really excited to see what the future holds for Jennette McCurdy. I would love to read more things by her if she were to publish more. It really was a very eye-opening read, and it really makes me want to read more memoirs. So maybe that will be a goal of mine in 2023, to read more people's life stories. So overall, I had a great reading year in 2022. Reading is such a great escape, especially when you find a book that you just absolutely love. Thank you so much for spending your time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. If you would like to see more videos, please take the time to subscribe. And also you can check me out on Instagram. I've started posting book recs over there too. I hope you find something good to read, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Rebecca Ross created this folklore that just felt so real and was Ben.